Welcome to the Year of the Movie podcast, the podcast where we talk about movies from the year of the movie 2023. We're your hosts, and we started this podcast because 2023 is kind of a goofy year for movies.
You could say that.
Goofy in the sense that there were goofy movies, and there are also fantastic movies.
Mm-hmm.
And so many movies.
As we've learned and continue to learn every day.
If you like this podcast, please consider supporting us on Patreon, reviewing and rating on your podcast platforms, following us on Instagram, subscribing on YouTube, and having a good day.
Yeah.
Today's kind of a special episode.
Mm-hmm.
We're talking about the movie Linoleum.
Mm-hmm.
And Linoleum is a movie that we've hinted at in many episodes.
Whenever we've been like, this is our top 5. Except for that one movie that we'll get to eventually.
Yeah.
We don't want to mention what it is. It's this one.
It's this one. And what makes this episode special is we are interviewing, pretty exciting, the director and writer Colin West.
We're journalists now.
Yes. So keep watching because that'll happen in just a couple minutes. We just want to get through a couple like synopsis
Yeah.
type thing. We're not going to do like the whole coverage like we normally do, so that we can just talk.
Yeah.
With Colin.
Yeah. So the synopsis of Linoleum is: when the host of a failing children's science show endeavors to achieve his childhood dream of becoming an astronaut by constructing a rocket ship in his garage, a series of bizarre events occur that cause him to question his own reality. What were your first impressions when you heard about this movie? / do you remember how you heard about this movie?
It was definitely just a trailer that came up on YouTube,
Yeah.
and I was into it because it's got Jim Gaffigan, Michael Ian Black is in it, and it just looked kind of weird in like a fun sci-fi way, and I was like, oh, I'm definitely intrigued by this movie. What about you?
I think the same. I think maybe you showed me the trailer to this movie.
Probably, yeah.
Yeah, pretty much the same. It was like, oh, Jim Gaffigan is in a movie, like the lead in a movie? Interesting.
Yeah.
And then watched the trailer and it was like, interesting.
I'm definitely always a fan of comedic actors doing serious roles.
Yeah.
I know Jim Gaffigan is in like a very serious thriller. Haven't watched that. But this one looked like a serious film that was still fun and like really emotional. And that's what I am into.
I think, yeah, when comedic actors or comedians like branch out into the other stuff, then I think like this is the type of thing that I would like them to be in, where it is emotional and not just dark.
Yeah.
Because like thriller is fine and obviously a specific skill set, but like emotional is probably harder to get to.
Yeah.
So, because this is a different episode, we're not gonna do a breakdown of the trailer. Go watch it.
Yes.
And also watch the movie. We highly recommend watching the movie before listening to this episode.
We will spoil it.
Yes. And you can find it on Canopy, which is the free thing that libraries have. It's great.
You just need a library card.
Yeah.
And sign up with Canopy.
And then you get like a certain amount of credits a month to watch stuff.
If you don't want to do that and support libraries, whatever.
We are sponsored by Canopy.
We're not, but we should be. It should also be on Hulu, and you should be able to rent it for like $3 on Apple. Yeah.
It's around. Find it.
Watch it.
Watch it.
Do it, cowards.
We don't do a call to action for our stuff, but we will for this. Yeah, the cast of the movie, like we mentioned, Jim Gaffigan as Cameron/Kent. He plays 2 different characters.
Yep.
Rhea Seehorn as Aaron, Caitlin Nakin as Nora, Gabriel Rush as Mark, West Duchovny as Darcy, Amy Hargreaves as Linda, Roger Hendrick Simon as Mac, Michael Ian Black as Tony, and Tony Shalhoub as Dr. Alvin. Yeah, it's a little hard to describe the characters of this movie without giving away everything.
Mm-hmm.
So watch the movie.
Watch the movie. If you still haven't watched it since the last time we said watch the movie,
What's going on?
there's something wrong.
You heard the name Tony Shalhoub and you didn't hit play? Yeah, they're all great. Performances are great.
Yep.
And then this is the plot breakdown that is on Wikipedia for this movie. Cameron Edwin lives a rather boring life in a small Ohio town with his wife Erin and daughter Nora. He hosts a children's science television show in a small market that runs at midnight. Cameron always wanted to be an astronaut but grew up in the shadow of his more successful scientist father. When part of a rocket falls from orbit and crashes into his backyard, he decides to fulfill his unrealized dream and rebuild it into his own rocket. His wife, who has started divorce proceedings, thinks he's having a midlife crisis. As other surreal events occur in his life, he not only feels his mission is justified, but begins to question the nature of reality. It's as comprehensive as it could possibly be without spoiling everything.
Yeah.
So again, watch the movie.
I don't know if you remember way back when we told you to watch the movie.
But I was there. And I remember.
Yeah. And now, we're just going to throw you into the interview.
It's happening.
It's happening. Go. Welcome, Colin West, director-writer of Linoleum, fellow filmmaker. How are you doing today?
Good. Super excited to be here. Yes. Thank you for the invite.
Yeah.
Do you want to say a little bit about yourself? Just like, obviously you are a director and writer. Is there anything else you want people to know?
Oh man, what a Pandora's box. No, I'm let's see, I think things that are a little relevant to the film. Like I was born and raised in Ohio, which is where the film is sort of vaguely set. And I know you guys are based in Ohio, which is really cool.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I love the Ohio folks. Born and raised in Columbus, and then went to Ohio State for my undergrad's actually in fine arts, like painting and sculpture. And so I spent a few years in that world, sort of post graduating. I worked for an amazing artist named Ann Hamilton, and learned a lot from her just about being an artist and the way with which to sort of approach the world, sort of with an open mind and all that stuff. And it was a really great process with her. And then I found myself moving out to Los Angeles to pursue more narrative filmmaking, which is what I actually did. In high school, I was like sort of an AV nerd. I tried to do the sports thing and I just wasn't built for it or something, and no one wanted me on their team. So I went, I found movies at the local library when I was like 13, and that really set me down a path that was, like driven towards like examining the world through the lens of art. And I think like, in high school, one of the movies that I got from the library was the movie Pi, was Darren Aronofsky's first film.
Yeah.
He later went on to do like Requiem for a Dream and Black Swan and, all these big films, The Whale just last year. And, I watched his first movie and I loved it so much that I found him online. I mean, this is like the year 2000, and I emailed him and I was like, hey, I'm 13 and I really loved your movie. And like, I've like, how do you make a movie? Like, tell me more. And he wrote back with some suggestions and stuff like that. So that's kind of what, we ended up kind of writing back and forth for a few months as I kind of wrote my first script, and it was totally like a ripoff of his movie. And, but yeah, that's what got me kind of into filmmaking in general. And so then I kind of came back around to it, after my stint, like in the sort of fine arts world, and moved out to LA and went to grad school out here, and kind of been in the thick of more narrative filmmaking since then. So
nice. Yeah, that's very cool.
Yeah,
that's cool that he wrote back.
Yeah,
like that's because like now you're like, oh, I'm just gonna email Darren Aronofsky real quick. You're obviously not gonna get a response.
Well, yeah, I mean, it was in hindsight kind of like a bold move, but at the same time, like he wasn't big at that point.
Yeah.
Like it was right before Requiem for a Dream came out, so that's what really put him on the map. This first film of his was it was called Pi, and it was this gritty, like $60,000 film that's black and white, shot on 16 millimeter, like all handheld. Like it's very, bizarre. And I think that's why I really tuned into it, because it was something different than what I, normally seen. So anyway, that's kind of my world. But
nice.
Cool. Well, thanks for introducing yourself, and I think now we'll get more into Linoleum specific questions.
Yeah.
Sure.
So you've mentioned in interviews before that this story was partially inspired by your grandparents' relationship and them being together like high school sweethearts and then together for the rest of their lives. Was there like a specific moment or aspect of their relationship that led to like this version of that kind of story?
Yeah, I mean, it's, the film is like, as you guys know, like it has kind of this big kind of reveal at the end where it's like, oh, all these storylines are kind of tied together. And that moment in particular came about so I started the screenplay in 2015, and we didn't shoot the film until 2020. And so there was a lot of time in there as I was writing the film. And actually in the span of that time, my grandmother passed away and my grandfather passed away. And so when my grandfather passed away, it was actually in 2018. And he, the last possession that he had was like his watch that was like on him at the time. And I was there in the hospital when it happened. And it was, sort of chaotic and sad and stuff, but the nurse gave me his watch, like that was like just like in the kind of chaos of it. And I remember looking at the watch when I got home, and I realized that the watch was like 3 hours off. And so I sort of realized that like in some subjective way, like he was either living like 3 hours in the future, or like we're all living 3 hours in the past. Like it was a very like it changed the screenplay entirely, where I was like, before it was very sort of traditional flashbacks and so forth. And then I was like, no, this all can just kind of happen like a chorus all at the same time. And that was certainly a big moment. But I think like the love between them was really seen. My grandmother had Parkinson's for, she's almost 30 years, which is a very long time to have Parkinson's. But my grandfather was taking care of her throughout her life. So he was just he was such a caretaker and such a lovely guy. And I think that sort of like sweetness between the two of them, I think, is what that relationship really, I kind of drew from a lot,
Yeah.
Was there aspects of that, their relationship that inspired like the Nora and Mark era of the relationship that we see? I don't know how much you know about like when they were together in high school, if that was where that
I mean,
from.
I hear stories and stuff, but it's funny because like the story is it's certainly influenced by my grandparents' relationship, of course, but like there's so much of me in there. I think that I relate more to that, the Mark and Nora storyline, because it's like I was filling in all of the gaps using my own life, and it's not like my grandfather was a scientist who, like studied rockets and stuff. He was actually like a car mechanic, like a machinist who would do like, these sort of very intricate engine work. But at the same time, he was like a tinkerer, right? So I think with Mark and Nora, like a lot of that stuff, I think really comes from my own, like growing up,
Nice. And then last night we also watched your short, Here and Beyond, and then it's...
Oh, really? Oh, cool. Thanks.
So it's very similar to Linoleum, but I wasn't sure if Linoleum was always intended as like a expansion of that original story, because the arc of that character, or like the time travel element, is a bit different between the two.
It is, yeah, Maggie. Well, thanks for checking that out. That's cool that you did that. Yeah, so that short film, I made that in 2018. So I had already written the feature, and I was working on that, and that the short film is actually was my thesis film in grad school.
Gotcha.
And so I sort of used that opportunity of like the school's resources and all that stuff to kind of make a version of this film. And I'm really proud of it, but yeah, it is different. Like it's certainly much smaller. It's more, and the whole sort of time travel element is much more like concrete, and like there's like a time machine, like a literal time machine.
Yeah.
So it's different, but I think some of the tone is the same, and that's what I really wanted to try to find in making that short. Like just really explore that, like because it's a weird film. Like it's like it's vibe, but it's a drama, but there's comedy, and it's it's got a lot of elements to it, and so it was a delicate balance, and I wanted to kind of explore what that would be like with that short. But then then we kind of did use the short to try to like get funding and that kind of thing, so it was certainly helpful as a tool in that regard as well.
It's not a question that we have written down, but I was just thinking, you do a thing in both the short film and the feature Linoleum, where characters are having conversations and the conversation is fluid, but like they're having it in different locations in a way, but like it goes, like it jumps back and forth. I guess like in the script, do you just write out the script and then when you're filming it, you'd be like, oh, this would look cool this way? Or is it in the script broken down? Like they're at the train yard, now they're in the parking lot, they're back at the train yard. Like,
yeah, totally, Sebastian. That's a great question, because screenwriting always kind of bothers me because it's not cinema, and it's impossible to fully just write down in words what you're gonna see and how it's gonna feel. Because if you could just write that down in words, then you wouldn't need to make the movie. The script would be enough, or it would be a book or whatever, a different sort of format. But like editing is really what makes cinema beyond any other piece of the puzzle, I think. And that idea of like using editing in a way that's like that scene in particular, we always called it the train scene. Like me and my editor would be like, oh, the train scene, because they're sort of like walking around a train with like flashlights. And the interesting thing about that in particular is we shot that scene very normally. Like it was written in the script. It's like maybe a 2 or 3 page scene. And the whole thing we shot with them like sitting on the caboose of this train in a train yard. And it was like a Friday when we shot that scene. It was like the last scene of the week. And it was somewhere in the middle of the shoot, but we shot that, and we had the whole crew there, and there was it was like 50 people, and like everybody in hair and makeup, and everybody kind of balancing this thing. And when I went to watch it the next day for dailies, like it was just sort of dead. And it was this scene where these two people needed to really come to an understanding of each other, and really sort of fall for one another. And I wasn't feeling that in this very constructed scene where it was like, okay, like we've got these very deliberate, like, singles of each on each side, and we're not crossing the line. It's very, like very typical filmmaking. I don't know what that means, but, and then I asked the actors, and my cinematographer and the sound guy and a producer, if they would be willing to go out that weekend while we were off and just go back to that location, just like the 5 of us, and just shoot some stuff. And they were all really excited about it. It was like getting to go back to like these like early days of like me in high school with my buddies, like filming, just with small groups and playing around. And we came up with this technique where I would cue them, like I had like certain words like Darcy, or like whatever, like these different words that would cue different sections of their talk. And I told them to start, like when I would cue them, I told them to start at that point in the script, but to just go somewhere else with it. And so just sort of start ad-libbing, and every once in a while I'd kind of like cue them with a word, and they would get back into the actual meat of it. But we were just like floating around and like like really playing, and I think the actors just loved it, and the cinematographer was getting all these great angles and stuff, and I didn't know how I was going to edit together. I had no clue. But I think that scene ends up really standing out because it's so organic. And I think you can really feel the way in which it's sort of like you can feel them falling for each other, because in a lot of ways they were like actually getting to know each other like through this scene. So that was really particular. But thanks for asking. That was a good.
Yeah, I feel like there's a magic and truthfulness to the shoots, and like the times in a bigger shoot where you can just get the really small crew and just kind of run and gun, put the camera wherever, and like just get something that looks amazing. And like you guys obviously did that with that scene.
Yeah.
Well, thanks. Yeah, I appreciate that. It's very kind.
Was wondering about what kind of science background or interests do you have, and how did that become like such a big part of this story?
Yeah, totally, Maggie. So I think if I wasn't like a filmmaker, I'd really be, or an artist in that realm. Like I would definitely be in the sciences. Like I took as many science classes as I could in college and all that stuff. Like I'm very interested in it still to this day. And I think there's just as much creativity in the sciences as there is in the arts. It's just sort of applying it to a different field. And I was just like a huge mega fan of Bill Nye the Science Guy growing up. It was like very influential, and I loved, like, I would literally like come home from school and like watch Bill Nye, like it wasn't just at school, which made me sort of a mega nerd, but I love that stuff. And it's sort of innately part of me. My parents are both in the sciences. Like my dad's a computer scientist, and my mom worked in like big tech, for computer companies and stuff. And so it was always kind of a part of the language, around the dinner table and stuff like that. And we always kind of had like the latest tech things, and that kind of, I think certainly worked its way into my own passion for it. It's just sort of built into me. So to answer your question, like I don't think it was like deliberate. It just sort of came out that way. I think like a lot of my films have these sort of science bends to them, and it sort of tiptoes on the line of like science fiction, but it's sort of much more grounded than some of those bigger sci-fi films. So yeah, it's just sort of a part of me, Maggie. I don't know.
Yeah. I wasn't sure if there was like it seems like it's pretty natural, but whenever there's something that's based in sci-fi, I always wonder what the writing process is like. If like you just go through the dialogue and then you're like, insert science here, and I'll find something related and come back later.
No, totally. Well, at first it was like that, because it's like a part of the texture of the film. Mm-hmm. Like but then you realize like it was many, many, many drafts in that I started to really tailor the scenes of the show to be thematic to what was actually happening in the movie, right? So like at a certain point when like, all the characters sort of start dispersing from one another and growing apart, and like everything's kind of going wrong, the science show that you see in the background is like about chaos and how like, the world like, constantly gets tougher and rougher and all this stuff. And so that it was really fun to start threading the show in like all the science aspects, and being really deliberate with like what it is and what and why it needed to be about those particular topics. So so that was really fun. Yeah.
And then you had a science consultant, and we saw like one of the IMDb trivia facts is like everything that they describe is like accurate, like all the parts and everything like that. It was just, what was that process like?
I mean, as much as possible, Maggie. So yeah, I had at USC, the grad school that I was at, I went to the astrophysics department and met with like the head of the astrophysics department, and he was gracious enough to like read the script and provide his input into like what was sort of possible. I was like, okay, so it's about this guy who builds a rocket in his garage. And he was like, well, that's impossible, like, and I'm like, yeah, okay, but like, what if, and like, how could this really, function? And he came around to really like leaning into like, oh, I see what you're doing here. It's like the thematics of like, launching into space, but it's really not, and then it's like this fake rocket at the end, it really worked. And, but he did help with like the science show aspect and like these, these little bits and pieces. And, if a satellite could actually fall from space and what might actually, be there when it hits the ground and all that stuff. So he was really, was great and also kind of funny in that respect, to be like, I don't think any of this could actually happen, but if it did, then this, you know.
Yeah.
But as far as the actual like rocketry junk, yeah, all of that stuff, all of those props were legit from the Apollo era. Like, they were refuse from the Apollo era. And I actually got them through building a relationship with a guy who is in LA. His name's Carlos, and he works at a place called Norton Sales. He owns this place, and it's like a lot of the old Apollo stuff was built in Los Angeles. There's a jet propulsion lab, and a lot of that stuff was built here. Well, we shot the film in upstate New York. So what I did was actually I wanted to use all that junk because it was real, and I built this relationship, and so I bought a truck. I bought like a used U-Haul truck, filled it up with as much like rocket junk as I could, and I drove it across the country. We filmed using all of this stuff. You know, like that engine in the movie is like an actual Apollo built engine that was a backup for one of the for one of the Apollo missions. And then I packed it up. I drove all this stuff back, and I sold the van or the truck, and I actually made like $100 selling the thing. So it was like great.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was definitely a lot of work to make that really happen. Like, that stuff weighs incredible amount. It's like tons and tons, and like getting the stuff in and out of the truck was like horrible. But like the art department was really great with supporting that, and Molly Wartell was our production designer, and she was like super on board with making it as real as possible. So yeah.
Very cool.
You mentioned that you filmed in New York, but like you said, you are from Ohio, and it sort of takes place kind of in like a Dayton, Ohio suburb.
Yeah.
Were you hoping to film in Ohio, or were you just hoping to film anywhere? Like, what led to New York?
Well, you guys make movies. Yeah, I hope to film anywhere. You know, I wanted to shoot in Ohio, and we were talking to the folks there, and you know, about the tax credits and all that stuff. And we wound up in upstate New York for this or that reason, and that's great. I would love to shoot, you know, my next film in Ohio or further films in Ohio for sure. And I've been sort of talking to folks about that as well. But yeah, I mean, it was great. Like, going up to upstate New York when we decided on New York because of the tax credit and all, you know, some other factors. There was also COVID.
Yeah.
So we shot in October of 2020. And so this was like pre-vaccine COVID time. And so getting actors was very tricky, but we were able to kind of bring some people up from New York, and then we, you know, kind of bubbled in a hotel. But we'd kind of searched around and found that Kingston, New York, which is in upstate, kind of right on the Hudson River, looked a hell of a lot like Ohio, just in its sort of small town nature. And I was like, oh, this could pass for like somewhere outside of Dayton, you know, like, and so, yeah, we just leaned into it and kind of really tried to make it as Midwest feeling as possible, which wasn't really too hard to do with upstate New York. It's still deciduous forest and all that. So it was good.
Yeah. Nice. So the cast of this film is really strong. There's really great performances. Obviously, Jim Gaffigan is great as the lead. Just want to know what the casting process was like to get everyone on board. And then did you get Michael Ian Black because Jim Gaffigan is friends with him, or how did that work?
Yeah, sure. No, so yeah, I mean, our cast was really great. I was very lucky to work with such amazing actors, and yeah, it was a strange casting process for two reasons. One, it was sort of like my first, you know, movie on a scale like this. So there was like kind of real money involved, and you know, our casting director who was reaching out to the agencies and all that stuff. And so I was sort of learning about the process as it was happening as well. And it took a long time, you know, I think because like, you know, you kind of have to like convince people that like, you know what you're doing, even though you haven't made something like this before, right? So it took a while. We actually our casting process, we were looking for like our lead character for, maybe 2 years or so. And then of course COVID hit, and our pool of actors really shrunk dramatically. Especially any of the non-lead characters had to come from like a 30-mile radius of Kingston, New York. so we found a local casting director who helped us sort of cast all like the really small parts. But again, like it was like I had maybe 8 or 10 actors to choose from for like a lot of these roles and stuff. But yeah, Gaffigan came on actually really, really last minute, and we were very excited to have him. But he came on, and people love Jim, and they want to work with Jim. And Jim was like, "Oh, you're looking for this character? Like, what if I'll give Michael a call? Yeah, I think he'll probably do it." And so we drove Michael up from New York for the day to shoot this thing, and and same with like Tony Shalhoub, like these. It was really, really nice to have that. I mean, it was both an incredible hassle to deal with COVID, but also kind of led to this like really extreme like summer camp like vibe that happened on set because we were so bubbled. And they were just so game. I was really excited about what Jim brought to the table, especially trying to, he was in both, 2 roles in the film, and there was a real tightrope to walk for all of the actors because they're all each other at different ages, right? And so they all kind of were working together, and we were trying to sort of thread that tapestry together in some regard. But it was a great process, and Jim's really nice to work with. Ray Seahorn was incredible. She was those two as well. I think they really got to be good friends throughout the shoot, so it was fun.
How? Sorry.
No, you go.
Okay. How early in the script, since they are the same character at different ages, did you name them Cam, Mac, Aaron, Nora? Because obviously Cam and Mac are reversed, and Nora is a different spelling of Aaron backwards.
Yeah, I'm glad you picked up on that. I like that you said the word obviously, because you're one of like, I don't know, 5 people that ever like noticed that. So
well.
It was, and part of that too was it was tough. It came pretty early because I was writing the script, and in the script you have to write what their name is. In the movie itself, none of the characters really say each other's names except Cameron and Aaron.
Yeah.
It's only like because we actually had to credit these actors as somebody in that we like named them, and obviously in the script I had to name them but make it not obvious for the reader to give away that it's all the same people right at the beginning. So it came pretty early, Sebastian, but at the same time like it was weird. It was like kind of because it's not normal, like it's not like something that every movie has to deal with. But it was fun, and I think that was like an exciting challenge for the actors as well to kind of make that work as well. So
I was curious because like I also am a writer, and so like I know like there are times where like I'll name characters something, I'll finish the script, I'm reading through it, I'm like, oh my god, their name should be this.
For sure. Yeah, I mean, I think I initially labeled them all the same, and then I realized, as a reader, if the kid was named Cameron and the middle-aged guy was Cameron and the older guy was Cameron, like, okay, well, you're just kind of destroying the whole emotion of the thing. So,
I like when you watch it and then you know what happens at the end, and then you go back and there are all the little details that come together of like I really like when Cam and Mark are standing next to each other and they both put their arm placement at the same time.
Same with Mac.
You noticed.
Same with like when cool. On the bed and like they both do this and it's.
And then I think Nora and Aaron drinking milk. They do that at the same time.
Wow, you guys really watched it.
I mean, that's
movies.
Amazing.
We watch movies.
No, I know. You watch movies exclusively from 2023.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. This is our hobby now.
It's awesome that you notice those small details because I do think, and a lot of people have said this, that the movie's even better on the second time you watch it.
It still got us on our second watching. Yeah.
And it's tough because it is ostensibly like a time travel movie, and so with a time travel movie, you're gonna have paradoxes, and so there's some things that, if you really think about it, like don't work, and like there is some math involved there, but like. Again, like we just tried to lean into the emotional side of what this is rather than sort of being too practical with anything.
Yeah.
And I think that's so.
Yeah. It worked so well that I didn't care about thinking about it more.
That's good.
I watched Arrival, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, for the first time recently, and after that, I was like, but none of it makes sense. But like,
Yeah, sure.
Linoleum is not one where I was like, let me think about it harder, because like
The hard science of
the
this
story
sci-fi.
was so
Yeah.
succinct and it was so emotional that I was just like, no, this is what I have ingested, and that's all I want.
Yeah.
So,
Well, that's cool. I mean, we definitely had a lot of conversations about how to not make it about the reveal, like not make the whole movie hinge on that fact. You know, we recognize that, you know, like you could either go like the M. Night Shyamalan way, where it's like, oh, there's a very hard line where it's like, and this is what's been happening the whole
yeah.
time. And I think in this film we kept calling it like a blurry reveal, where like it's there's no one moment that everybody figures it out. Some people actually figure it out way earlier on, and I'm totally okay with that. And some people, you know, have to watch it a second time to really figure it out or whatever. But I think I enjoy that, and I think that sort of works for this, you know.
Yeah. The production design of this movie is very strong. You mentioned Molly earlier. The Above and Beyond show is like a very specific vibe. It's definitely got that Bill Nye feel to it.
Yeah.
And then was there an intention in setting the film in like a specific decade? There's definitely like 90s-ish, but then it also feels like out of time in a good way, of just like it's just generally nostalgic for whatever period this
Yeah,
is.
Maggie. I mean yeah, speaking of like challenges, I mean, here you are, like it's a movie that's set in like the 60s, the 90s, and current day at the same time, kind of without telling you. So you have these really strange juxtapositions of place that occur, and costume, and like vibe. And so it was always about like, okay, what is this scene and where is it actually set, you know? So any of the scenes that were just with Mark and Nora, the high schoolers, we really tried to be like, okay, we're going to make this like in the 60s, you know, like they have school uniforms. They're like at a school that was built in the 50s, you know, like it. And then if it's like just the, you know, the older couple, you know, Mac, and it would be current day. So like maybe we'd put like a cell phone on the table in the background, or like, you know, like kind of lean into that. But then you put all these things together, and then there's many scenes where there's a mix of timelines happening, and we would put in pieces of those two time periods deliberately to sort of make it more about, and this is something we often said, was like, this movie is set in a tone, not a time. And I think that was really helpful for everybody to like kind of throw away their preconceived notions of like what things need to be, you know, because often it's like, okay, this is 1963 and everything has to be, you know. But it was really fun to be like, okay, there's a game, this kid's playing a Game Boy, but also like there's like the kid is going to school like in this 60s school uniform, and like it was, and had like a 60s camera and like all of that stuff. It's like very funky, and I love that. I'm like all for that. I'm like, even the next movie that I wrote is just like set in this weird like ambiguous time period, and I just think that's like so fun, and especially when it, you know, obviously adds to the story, but it was certainly a challenge. So yeah, I think Molly was like, okay, how, like, let's figure this out, you know. We sort of took it on a scene by scene basis, you know?
Yeah. So we're based in Cincinnati. We're both from Indiana, and then you're obviously from Columbus. Was it a difficult transition to then go to LA, or do you feel like being from the Midwest has influenced your filmmaking in specific ways?
Yeah, Maggie. I mean, I think it's a challenge to move, you know, to a big city from a small town, like for anyone. But at the same time, the cool thing is like the people I gravitate towards out here in LA, like all my friends are also like Midwest kids.
Yeah.
Like, so it's like we can't avoid each other, you know, like we're all in this together, you know? And I think the Midwest influences my films more now than it used to when I was back in the Midwest making movies, because I have an extreme nostalgia for Ohio and what that's like, and the people there, and the environment, and the weather, and the, you know, everything about it. And so, you know, for me, that's, you know, in a lot of ways home, you know, so I sort of dream about that, and filmmaking is dreaming. And so it just comes out on the page, you know. Yeah. It always inspires me when I go back to the Midwest, you know. Being in LA, it's not as inspiring of a town, really. So, you know, I think maybe one day I'll find myself back there, you know, living, you know, when that makes sense. And I'll be excited to do that, you know?
Yeah. That's fair. Yeah. And then you've mentioned that the script took you a few years to write. I was wondering if that like your typical writing process, so you just kind of like, do you make yourself operate on a timeline, or just kind of like when it happens, it happens, and that's great?
Yeah. Good question. My writing process really differs on each script. Linoleum took forever to write. I mean, even the first draft took forever to write. But like the last script that I wrote in 2 days. But those 2 days were spread out by like 9 months. They were like 9 months apart.
Yeah.
And so like I just can't predict it. Some people are very regimented. Like my wife, she's a filmmaker, and she's very like, she'll write 3 to 5 pages a day until like the script is done. And like I just don't operate that way. Like,
no.
like also like her office is like really organized, and mine's like a total chaotic mess. And like, you know, so I just, everybody works differently. And I think for me, it like each story sort of speaks in its own, you know, at its own pace. And I think it just sort of, I just kind of take what I can get. And I have really good days, and I have really horrible days where I'm like, oh, this is the worst thing in the world. But yeah, I think with Linoleum especially, I was learning a lot as I was writing that too. And I was sort of like continually kind of putting my life into it. And I think that's why, you know, it was one that got made. You know, I've probably written 30 features in my life, and to have that one sort of actually get through all the hurdles to get made, you know, I think says something. And I think it's absolutely the most personal, you know, script that I've written.
Yeah.
And I think it made people, you know, get a little teary at the end, even in the script. And I think that's what kind of made it eventually get to screen, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's pretty effective if you can make people cry while they're reading a script.
Yeah. It only took 5 years. So.
So yeah, we'll spoil the ending a little bit here, because we do just talk about the entire movie on these podcast episodes.
Sure. Yeah, I've listened to a few episodes. I really like it, guys. It's a good podcast.
You.
Super entertaining.
I
appreciate it.
So like at the end, it's revealing everything, and then the big reveal about Sam. How often do people like how often have people gone up to you or said something to you of like, oh my God, I did not notice that Sam was 5 different children.
5 different actors played the same character. Yeah.
And then Jim Gaffigan's 2 kids.
2 of his kids.
2 of his kids.
2 of his kids are there. Like the 2 reddest hair of kids.
I figured. Yeah.
Yeah, that was you know, how often, to answer that, like how often people come up and say something about that. Usually, like if I'm at a screening, like at a festival or something, and you know, it's a theater full of people, somebody will be like, wow, like what, you know, either why did you choose to do it with all these different actors or whatever, and then everyone else in the theater goes, wait, what? And that's when they realize that it was also like 5 different actors.
Yeah.
I think because you sort of see Sam never speaks to that character, never speaks. He's just sort of around. He barely has a shot that's like just him. It's usually like he's kind of with other people and kind of in the background. So, but I think that storyline the sort of the son that never existed, and that idea of like not knowing what they might have looked like had they grown up, was really poignant to certain people. I think mostly what I hear is after a screening, people will come up and say, you know, oh, I lost a child when they were very young, or, you know, in the birthing process or something like that. And that moment really affected me because I think about that all the time. And that's, you know, in some ways, like, I don't know, I think people feel sort of seen in those moments. And I think that is nice for me, you know, that it can be sort of somewhat therapeutic or something.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I feel like the Sam story kind of speaks onto what you were saying earlier of just like in a script you can't show what you're trying to show in a movie, but like the Sam storyline, you told a heartfelt story without words because he doesn't speak, and then it's at the end you get that like quick reveal of Sam never was born, right?
Yeah.
And so it's just like this beautiful story without any words, and I just think that speaks to the filmmaking in general and the art of filmmaking. But
Thanks, Sebastian. I mean, that idea of actually using 5 different actors came not in the writing process. It came when we were in pre-production and we were actually casting this boy. And you know, movies are so collaborative. It's hard to know like where ideas really come from because everybody's just, it's sort of like a hive of like a hive mind. Speaking of Star Trek, like a hive mind. You know, ideas that come together. And I remember we were sort of like like me and my producers were kind of leafing through all of these kids. I mean, again, we didn't have a lot, but there was like maybe 15 kids that we were choosing from. And we had them all kind of laid on the table, like the pictures of them. And it was like, wait a minute, like, what if, you know, that was all 5, maybe there was 5 actors or whatever. And that was, it's really, you know, it's cinematic, like you're saying, like it's cinematic language, and it's not, you kind of can't do it in any other form but this. And I like that about it. So, you know, you have to be open to those discoveries, right?
Yeah. Kind of related to that, and then what you were saying earlier of like, it's less of a twist and more of like a soft reveal of everything that's going on. How much of that was like in the original script versus came together in the editing process?
Yeah, I mean, the whole, as you guys know, like the last 15 minutes of the movie is just like one big montage.
Yeah.
And I knew that it was going to be somewhat like that. I didn't know exactly how it was going to be pieced together. I knew that was going to be found in the edit. But I also know to find something in the edit, you actually need to shoot things.
Yeah.
To be you. So I wrote scenes to shoot, knowing that we were going to throw it all in a blender and, you know, out would come something that I hadn't even dreamed of before. So it was, the script had to sort of convey the emotion of what would happen with this sequence, but it had to be much more literal because it's a script and not an edited film, right? So, you know, the script is out there, it's online, like you can read it, and it gives you a similar feeling, but it's a different version of the ending. So, so yeah, it was a lot of stitching together, and Kira Burton was our editor, and she did a really great job of very deliberately trying certain edits to see what would actually function, you know? But it's tricky, another tricky thing.
Yeah. Just a couple other questions. If you can mention anything, what are you working on next?
Yeah, sure. I can't get too specific, but a couple of things, and I'm really excited about them. But one that is kind of closest to going is a film that's very much a like everyone when they read it, they're like, oh, this is totally like your next movie. Like this is totally like Linoleum Part 2 in some regard, you know. I think it has a similar tone and vibe, and it's like sci-fi adjacent and kind of, you know, sets up a very like existential world. But it pushes into like the meta, like not like the meta universe thing, but more like it just gets kind of meta within itself. So it's an even harder sell than Linoleum was. But that we've been making some steps towards that, and I'm excited about that. So cross my fingers, we'll be heading on the set in the next I don't know, hopefully within a year, but
Yeah.
they're talking about sooner, so we'll see.
Very cool.
We'll keep our eyes open, and you'll have to keep us updated on
Yeah.
that, because
Yeah, for sure. We'll
definitely
do.
going to want to watch that.
Yeah. And then because of what our podcast is, do you have any favorite 2023 movies that you can think of?
Oh man, I prepared for this question. Wrote things down.
Oh,
Okay.
good.
It's like you guys have like the craziest. This is like the craziest premise for a podcast I've ever seen. Like
It's
literally
specific.
it's specific, but it's also like it's not like you chose 1921 or 1983. Like it's 2023, which
Yeah.
is like last year.
Yeah.
Like it's very like prophetic. Like you guys are like assuming that 2023 is going to be like a stamp on cinematic,
Yep.
history. And I believe it after like watching the like listening to the podcast. Like I'm like, oh, you're right. These are pretty weird movies.
Yeah.
But I'm happy Linoleum is a part of the 2023
Yeah.
idea. Okay, so I also thought 2023 was a great year for film. Like I think there are a few that come through, and I think 23 was really great, especially because Linoleum came out.
Of course.
No, but I have 4 that I was like totally in love with, and then like a bunch that I also really love. But
Yeah.
I think for me, the 4 that really did it in 2023 were American Fiction, Anatomy of a Fall. I thought Asteroid City was like unreal,
Yeah.
and I love The Holdovers.
Yes.
So those are like the top ones that I thought were really like they kind of spoke to me for sure.
We have not seen the first 2 you listed yet.
They're both on
Oh,
my
man.
list of like, I know I'm going to like
Yeah.
this when we get there. There's just so many until we get there.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah. It's funny. Like I Googled like 2023 movies and, before we got on the call just to like kind of make this list. And I was
Yeah.
like, oh yeah. Like all these, like there was Strays, but there was also a movie called The Strays.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah.
Like what?
Uh-huh.
Like, I don't know. It's just, yeah, it's bizarre.
yeah.
I think it's pretty wild that 65 wasn't on your list.
Oh, that's funny. Yeah.
60
I hadn't actually seen 65 still.
That's okay.
That was the first trailer that I was like, oh, this is gonna be a weird year. Like,
Yeah.
like it was just like 65 billion years ago. Adam Driver.
Adam Driver presents. No, that's great. That's great. Yeah.
Yeah. But Holdovers and Asteroid City are both in our like fluctuating top 5. They always stay
Yeah.
there for those.
Yeah.
So,
I thought
Absolutely.
The Holdovers was just one of the greatest movies of like recent cinema. Like it was just so beautiful.
Yeah.
I
And
couldn't agree more. And I think most Alexander Payne movies I could say I could just watch over and over, but like especially with The Holdovers, like I feel like it's going to be one of those like annual films for me that I just kind of put on because it makes you feel so good. It's not like it's a happy story per se, but it's
Yeah.
like just the vibe. They
it's
just
positive.
nailed that tone.
Yeah.
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 It's a movie that like I have family who don't like watching movies, but like that's one that they were like, oh, I love this movie and I want to watch it again. And so
Totally,
like,
Sebastian. It's
Yeah.
it's the movie that you can truly recommend to anybody.
yeah.
Like it's really enticing of
Yeah.
a film. Mhm.
Did you have others on your list of like honorable mentions or anything?
All right, I'll rapid fire the other ones that I think are really good.
Excellent.
Okay. Dream Scenario, El Conde, Robot Dreams, Blackberry, Mr. Monk's Last Case, because
Yeah.
Tony
totally.
Shalhoub. Poor Things, a short film called Night Cafe I really enjoyed.
Oh.
May, December. I like the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movie. I know you guys aren't like totally sold on it from another episode that I listened to, but
Yep.
Godzilla -1 I thought was incredible. And my wife's movie also came out at the end of 2023. It's called B-Side for Taylor. So I have to plug that as well.
Yes.
So.
Yeah, we will get that.
We can interview her next.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, she'd love to. So.
Perfect.
I'll say about Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. I
Yes,
have
please.
watched the new TV show that is like kind of a part of that universe.
Yep.
I liked that show and made me appreciate that universe more. But
Yes.
as I said in that episode, I am just such a huge fan that it took me some time before I was like, okay, I can see what they're doing.
Yeah, trust me. I think it's maybe not a movie for like mega fans.
Yeah.
But it does work, and it was very entertaining.
Yeah.
I thought.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Well, cool. Yeah.
I think that's all we have. Thank you again so much for doing this. This was great, and we really like your movie, and we're really glad that we get to talk to you about it. So thank you.
Is there anywhere to find you, to follow you, things to plug?
Yeah. All that good stuff.
It's funny, like every interview they always ask me this, and I'm not on any social media. I don't I have like a website that I barely update. Like I don't know. I mean, I always say, just like, if you want to know, like if you Google my name, like there's some stuff, things come out. So, I guess that's the only way to do it.
Right.
That works.
But thanks for the offer, for the plug offer.
Well, thanks for being here.
Yes, thank you so much.
Absolutely, you too.
All right, so that was our interview. Another thank you to Colin. It was really cool that he took the time to do that.
Yeah.
We're still gonna rate it.
Yeah.
Wouldn't it be just so cruel
if we were like...
It's a 2.
We were hyping this movie so much. Yeah. We're like, this one really stuck with us because it was just okay.
It was mid. But no. That's not how we feel. This was...
more than mid.
This was mid plus.
Some people call a 4.
Yeah, I gave it a 4.
Gave it a 4.
Yeah, this was the first movie we saw when starting this podcast that we gave a 4.
Yeah.
Which is another reason why we held off on it for so long, because we were like, oh, we should really try.
We should try and do something
different.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so you reached out to Colin. He replied.
That's great.
We got it done.
Wild.
Yeah.
Through the power of email.
You too.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we gave it a 4. Hope you liked the episode. Let us know if you want us to do more interviews.
Yeah.
We do always talk about other movies we've watched recently.
We do.
So I think our next one is we did Moonstruck, Atlantis, The Lost Empire.
Love Atlantis.
We watched Atlantis, The Lost Empire. It's a good Disney film. It's quality.
Yeah.
It's got a good cast. It's good animation.
Yeah. It's good. It's solid.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's a couple of things if you watch it with 2024 eyes when you're like, but the nostalgia outweighs it.
Yeah. But, like we said, follow us on social media. Leave questions and comments, and we'll respond to it on the VHS podcast. If you've got questions for Colin, you can put them in the comments, and we'll send them his way. And if he answers them,
great.
Then maybe we'll talk about it on another episode. That's crazy. But for now, we'll see you next week.
Goodbye.